So there I was, standing at the edge of my own land, watching Karen's 20 grand wedding tent flutter like it belonged at a royal garden party. Music thumping, guests in heels crushing my young soybeans. And her caterer had the nerve to ask if I could move my tractor because it was messing up the vibe. That's when I calmly hit the switch, and the manure spreaders kicked on with a roar. Smash cut to the intro screen. How do we end up here? Let's rewind 3 months, back when I still thought people, no matter how HOA obsessed or scooter riding, would at least have the decency to ask before mooching power from someone else's house. I'd just moved into what I thought was my peaceful suburban dream. A corner lot, nice backyard, good enough neighbors, and one outdoor outlet near the sidewalk I used for holiday lights and charging my e-bike. Nothing major. I'm not exactly a social butterfly, but I wave at folks, shovel snow, and even put up with the HOA's ridiculous 6-page guide on mailbox paint and trash bin etiquette. That all changed when Karen wheeled into my world, literally, on a squeaky scooter powered by my electricity. At first, it was subtle. I noticed her scooter parked near my hedge, plugged into my outlet with the cord lazily draped like some extension vine. I figured someone needed a quick charge and forgot. Maybe a kid's parent. I unplugged it, wrapped up the cord, and moved on. But the next day, there it was again. Same cord, same scooter. This time I waited. An hour later, Karen rounds the corner with her tote bag and a purse-sized dog that looked battery-operated. She unplugs like it's totally normal and starts scooting off. I call out, trying to keep it chill. Hey, just curious, did you check with anyone before plugging in? She stops and gives me this look, like I just accused her of kidnapping. I didn't think I had to, she says, with a sweet but smug tone. It's just a little juice, hon. That outlet's by the sidewalk. Technically public-facing. I blink. I'd read the HOA rules, twice. Nothing about outlets being up for grabs. That's my house. My wiring. My power bill. But she just shrugs, hits me with a fake smile, and rolls on. Should have ended there. But no. It became routine. Like clockwork, that scooter showed up. Sometimes even twice a day. She'd charge it while I was home, and wave like we were college roommates splitting utilities. My bill crept up. My breaker flipped, twice. I messaged the HOA. Their response: if the outlet isn't clearly marked private or locked, it might be viewed as available. No warning. No fine. No talking to Karen. Just a vague suggestion to get a locking cover if I cared that much. That's when I knew I was on my own. So I started keeping records. Every scooter sighting got logged. Time-stamped photos. I installed a motion camera pointed at the outlet. My inner introvert hated it, but the part of me that can't stand freeloaders was all in, building a nice little case file. But I wasn't ready to strike, yet. Then came the sprinkler mess. My sprinklers were on a basic timer. Light mist in the morning, quick burst at night to keep the lawn green. One morning, I step out and notice my hedge looks chewed up. Like something bulldozed through. Grass torn, sprinkler head busted. And wouldn't you know it, Karen's scooter had fresh mud splattered on it and a leaf wedged in the wheel. When I asked her, she just waved it off. Oh, I thought that was dead grass. Didn't look like it was doing much. You should water more. That sprinkler head? Kinda dangerous sticking up like that. I stared. My eye twitched. She smiled again. That smug, untouchable grin that says, I do what I want and you can't stop me. This wasn't just power theft anymore. She was damaging my stuff and daring me to say something. That night, I called my buddy Vince, licensed electrician and my go-to for fix-it jobs without turning the garage into a war zone. I told him the whole story, half expecting him to say, bro, just buy a lock. But Vince, I could hear the grin in his voice. He asked, you want legal or poetic? I asked if I could have both. Turns out, I could. That Saturday, we rewired the outdoor circuit through a separate breaker. Totally above board. All on my side of the property. No one touched her scooter. Vince installed a smart plug with usage tracking, a kill switch, and a clever little reroute. The best part? Whenever Karen plugged in, it caused a small surge that only tripped her circuit if the load went too high. My place? No issues. Her place? Blackout. The best part? No visible signs of tampering. The trap was live. First time she connected post-wiring, I was inside, sipping coffee, watching the outlet cam feed on my phone. Scooter rolled up. Plug went in. 10 seconds later, click. My system caught the pull. A faint hum inside the wall. 30 seconds after, her house across the road blinked out like someone flipped a master switch. Porch light? Gone. Indoor lights? Off. From my window, I saw her waving like she was swatting invisible bees. Then came the chaos. Karen burst outside, power flickering behind her, stormed over to my outlet, stared at it like it had insulted her pet. I saw her unplug, replug, stomp, mutter to herself, then roll back home. 5 minutes passed. Lights back on. 10 minutes later, she tried again. Click. Boom. Darkness. And because it's Karen, of course she called the cops. Yes, really. She said I was somehow turning electricity into a weapon, that I'd rigged an outlet to target a senior with mobility needs. The cop who arrived looked like he'd stepped into a sitcom. I handed over video footage, system logs, HOA messages, even my electrician's compliance certificate. Karen claimed her scooter was protected under disability rights, and that meant she could plug in anywhere. The officer just raised a brow and asked, "Ma'am, do you have permission to use that outlet?" She blinked, then said the magic words. Well, it's not like he said I couldn't. The officer nodded slowly. So, no permission. That little phrase unlocked what I'd been waiting for. Now I had the legal standing, not just to block her access, but to file an official complaint for trespassing and power theft. And since the HOA had been backing her, I wasn't going to them. I was going to the board president, who happened to be coming back from medical leave next week. A president rumored to loathe Karen with the kind of intensity usually reserved for termites or tax deadlines. And wouldn't you know it, Karen had a big weekend event planned. Something involving tint, loud music, and plenty of guests. That's when things got fun. Honestly, watching Karen's power drop the moment she tapped into my outlet was pure joy. That confused expression when her house cut out like someone yanked her personality plug, it was art. But that was just the warm-up. The real payback hadn't even begun. See, people like Karen don't apologize or reflect, they escalate. And escalate she did. Next morning, I got a polite knock on the door. Not the aggressive kind. The extra sweet, fake smile kind that only Karens master when pretending they're not seething. I opened it to find her, tiny dog under one arm, sunglasses perched like she was prepping to scold a barista. She got straight to it. Hi there, she chirped, all sugar and tension. I just wanted to check if your outlet's been acting up. My scooter keeps cutting out when I plug in. I smiled. Oh yeah, could be. Had some recent work done on it. Might be a bit more sensitive now. She cocked her head. Well, it used to work fine. Did it? I asked, pretending to think. Strange. My electric bill said otherwise. Her jaw twitched before she adjusted her glasses and replied, I'll bring it up with the HOA. Please do, I said. I've got all the documentation. And I did. Full logs. Power spikes. Time-stamped video. Vince even helped pull current data from the smart plug to compare her scooter's drain. It wasn't just proof, it was court-ready. Good thing, too, because she followed through. Kind of. That week, I got a note from the HOA. Not a violation. A formal invite to a meeting to discuss accessibility concerns raised by a neighbor. Vague wording, but I knew. Karen was playing the disability angle again, framing it like I was making her life harder by limiting access to community resources, aka my personal power outlet. But she messed up. She thought the HOA still answered to her. What she didn't realize, Ellen, our real HOA president, was back. And Ellen had zero tolerance for nonsense. I arrived at the meeting with every piece of evidence I had. Karen was already there, sitting in a folding chair, acting like she'd been the victim of a hate crime. As soon as she spotted me, she threw on that fake friendly smile. Ellen didn't acknowledge her at all. She motioned for me to sit down and said, let's keep this short. Karen jumped into her speech, over-rehearsed and over-dramatic. She talked about limited mobility, lack of outlets, and how the neighborhood should be more senior-friendly. She never claimed she had permission, just hinted that my outlet was basically for public use and that I was singling her out. She even pulled out a letter from her chiropractor that, no joke, claimed power interruptions were affecting her spine alignment. When it was my turn, I stayed calm. No yelling, no finger-pointing. I handed over a thumb drive with footage, records, and the electrician's statement. Then I said, this isn't about mobility. It's about respecting limits. She's tapped into my power without permission for 2 months. She wrecked my sprinkler system. The HOA didn't act. So I took steps, legally, on my own land, and now she's facing the outcome. Ellen barely spoke. She reviewed the footage, nodded here and there, then turned to Karen and asked, You never got his okay to use the outlet? Karen opened her mouth, paused, and finally said, I assumed. That's a no, Ellen cut in. And just like that, the meeting was over. Karen stormed out, mumbling about discrimination. Ellen looked at me and said, if she does it again, reach out. We'll file a formal notice. I figured it was over. I honestly thought that was it. But Karen, being Karen, decided to escalate. If she couldn't quietly steal electricity, she'd make noise doing it. That's when the wedding tent showed up. I pulled into my driveway one afternoon to see a giant white tent set up along the back edge of my property. Not the lawn, not the street, but my soybean field. Supposedly, Karen's niece or goddaughter or someone was getting married in a rustic country-themed wedding, and Karen had promised a perfect open space. She didn't ask me. She just went ahead, drove metal stakes into my soil, rolled chairs across my crops. And to top it all off, her caterer asked me to move my tractor because it didn't match the vibe. I didn't shout, just gave a smile, nodded, and walked into the shed. Because if Karen thought shutting off her power was rude, she clearly hadn't seen what my old John Deere could do with 2 manure spreaders and perfect timing. Next morning, right when the quartet started tuning, I flipped the switch. Both spreaders roared to life, spraying down the field's edges. Karen charged over in a glittery dress, screaming about permits and sanitation and how I was ruining everything. I just pointed and said, that line? My land. The part covered in cow waste? Also mine. The tent came down before sunset. The wedding moved to a public park. Karen tried to claim harassment. Didn't work. Ellen told her straight up, you trespassed, Karen. Be glad no one pressed charges. You'd hope she learned her lesson. Maybe decided to move on. Nope. She doubled down. Started asking folks for rides because her scooter was supposedly busted. Spread talk that I was sabotaging her. Put up a neon pink sign near my outlet that read, Karen's property, do not touch. Then, one night, she tried to plug in again. I caught it on camera. She waited late, well after dark. Probably thought I'd be asleep. She rolled up in her scooter, got off, crouched down, and plugged into the outlet. The second it connected, a low hum buzzed. The smart plug spiked. Then, boom. Her porch lights blinked once, and the front of her house went dark. But this time, it stayed dark. Not for 10 seconds. Not for 5 minutes. Not even after an hour. Karen came outside with a flashlight, looking pale and rattled. Then from across the street, someone yelled, Hey Karen, garage out again? She didn't answer, but I already knew. That slight adjustment to the wiring finally pushed her overloaded setup over the edge. And she had no clue what came next. The next day started with a literal bang. A loud pop echoed from her house, followed by a hissing sound and a little plume of smoke rising from the garage. I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching karma unfold. I didn't even blink. She came out in full chaos mode, robe halfway tied, curlers bouncing, yappy dog losing its mind. She glared up at the garage, muttering like the walls had turned against her. Turns out, her last plug-in session fried her exterior breaker. Not enough to be truly dangerous, but it knocked out her garage, porch light, and most of her front-facing power. Which meant her security cameras were off, motion lights were dead, and the garage door hung halfway open like a mechanical yawn. I spotted her pacing on her lawn, phone to her ear, arguing, probably with an electrician. When the van finally pulled up and the guy inspected things for 10 minutes, he wore a look I knew well. Same one my buddy Vince had when he saw Karen's spaghetti mess of cords and dollar store extenders. Half disbelief, half personal offense. Eventually, the electrician left, leaving Karen with a bill and no power on the front of her house. Word spread quick. Within an hour, 2 neighbors messaged me, one with a laughing emoji, the other asking if I'd finally snapped and taken out her grid. I didn't confirm or deny. I just posted a photo of my calm, glowing porch light with the caption, fully charged. That night, the HOA chat lit up. Karen had kicked off her own smear campaign, dropping a dramatic rant accusing a neighbor of using electrical sabotage, complete with blurry screenshots that looked like they came from a toaster. She claimed it was a plot to drive out residents with mobility challenges, tossed around harassment and ageism like party favors. Naturally, she demanded the HOA board take swift action against this aggressor. But what Karen didn't know, couldn't know, was that her power trip was over. Because Ellen, the real HOA president, was now fully in the loop. And Ellen wasn't just backing me. She was about to make Karen an example. Within 24 hours, a notice went out to all residents about a mandatory meeting to address property violations, power misuse, and false claims of utility ownership. The wording was neutral. The message wasn't. Karen showed up like she was walking into war, binder in hand, neck brace on, sporting a dramatic limp I'd never seen before. Honestly, I almost respected the performance. Almost. The meeting began, and Ellen didn't waste time. We've received multiple complaints regarding unauthorized use of private property, damage to landscaping, and repeated trespassing. We also have formal documentation submitted, including surveillance footage, electrical usage logs, and professional assessments. Karen, would you like to respond before we review the evidence? Karen stood, cleared her throat like she was about to deliver a eulogy, then launched into what could only be called a suburban epic. Claimed she depended on neighbor kindness to get around, and that I had set a trap specifically to disable her home. She waved a letter from a chiropractor, which definitely looked like it came from a template, and described the outage as part of a coordinated campaign to intimidate her. Accused me of dumping manure on her yard. Even suggested I'd hidden a generator in my hedges to fake a power issue. I said nothing. Just handed Ellen a USB. Ellen plugged it in. Up came the footage. Multiple clips showing Karen plugging into my outlet. Screenshots of the smart plug logs with power spikes. Her scooter rolling off after each charge. Pictures of my damaged sprinkler. A detailed explanation from Vince on how her overload tripped her system, but not mine. Clean. Precise. When the last clip ended, silence. Ellen turned to Karen, and for a moment, I thought she might show mercy. Then she said, calmly, "You used another resident's property without permission. Repeatedly. You caused damage. You escalated into slander. And you misrepresented yourself as a board authority while the president was on leave. This is not a disability issue. This is a boundary issue. And you have crossed every one." Karen began to protest, reaching for her binder like it held the Constitution. Ellen raised her hand. Enough. And just like that, the ruling came before anyone even refilled their coffee. Karen was ordered to repay not only me but 2 other neighbors whose outlets had mysteriously drained. She was barred from using any external outlet not tied to her home, removed from the board permanently, and, in a perfect twist, a new HOA bylaw was passed. All outdoor outlets must now be labeled and locked, and unauthorized use would be treated as trespassing. Karen didn't speak again that night, just sat there like someone had pulled the plug on her spirit. I watched her push her scooter down the road with her feet like a kid on a toy trike. The neck brace was off before she made it to her driveway. By the time it was all over, the neighborhood had taken a side. No more forced smiles when Karen passed by. No more bless-her-heart sympathy. Folks had had enough. Even the sweet elderly couple across the street, the ones who once brought her cookies, now made sure to unplug their porch lights every night. For a bit, I thought that was it. Neat, tidy closure. But soon, the gossip kicked up again. Karen wasn't bowing out gracefully. She was scheming, maybe prepping for a grand finale. One final play for her self-proclaimed crown. And of course, she did it in the most Karen fashion imaginable. She installed her own power source. But not just any power source. A glaring pink, outdoor-rated extension cord trailing from her garage window, duct-taped to a wooden fence post. At the bottom, a flimsy solar panel no bigger than a cafeteria tray. It looked like a 7th grader's science fair project. The next day, her scooter was plugged into it, soaking in what she probably saw as her glorious comeback moment. Problem was, the panel could barely power a nightlight. The scooter never even turned on. And by sunset, the cord shorted out, made a popping sound, and startled her dog into diving straight into the neighbor's koi pond. I stood on my porch watching it all unfold. Karen screaming at the dog, the neighbor yelling back, the limp solar panel swaying from the fence like a sad party balloon. And for a split second, I felt a level of calm I hadn't known since moving in. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't stop there. She never does. People like her don't give up. They regroup. And her next move? That's when she tried flipping the script. Not just for the neighborhood, but for the entire internet. It kicked off with a TikTok. I wasn't even the one who found it. My cousin sent it at midnight with a laughing emoji and the message, "Is this your scooter witch?" I clicked the link to see Karen, dramatically framed in her dimly lit garage, neck brace on, staring into her phone like she was delivering a hostage plea. She labeled herself a disabled senior, a victim of suburban torment, and claimed she'd suffered what she called a deliberate energy attack by ableist neighbors and corrupt HOA officials. I sat there stunned as she spun a completely made-up story involving me supposedly installing some power-blocking device that fried her medical scooter, with the HOA fully complicit, leaving her without power for weeks as punishment for defending inclusivity. The comments went exactly how you'd expect. A handful believed her. Online crusaders who treat every senior citizen with a dog and a sad story as gospel. But the rest didn't buy it. They saw through her immediately. A few local users even identified the neighborhood and started tearing holes in her version right there in the comments. One person wrote, "Girl, you ran that scooter into my yard last year and wrecked my flamingos. Sit down." Another dug up her property records and posted, "You own 3 cars and a hot tub. Quit acting like you're off-grid." I won't lie, I laughed. Hard. But part of me knew this wasn't just another Karen tantrum. This was a last-ditch campaign to sway public opinion and reclaim the narrative. And sadly, it started catching traction outside the neighborhood. Local media eat stories like this up. All they need is a snappy headline. Elderly woman alleges power cut in HOA dispute. Just the kind of fluff folks click between the weather and used car ads. And sure enough, a second-tier news outlet picked it up. They didn't interview her or check facts. They just clipped parts of her video over stock footage of power lines and suburban streets, tossed in some sad royalty-free music, and aired it on the weekend segment. No names, no addresses. But anyone from around here knew exactly who it was about. I figured it would burn out. The hype would fade. People would lose interest. And Karen would finally hit a wall. But nope, she pushed further. This time, she invited a so-called journalist to her lawn for an exclusive. And by journalist, I mean some dude with a YouTube channel, a patchy beard, and a drone license. I saw them filming in her yard that Saturday. Karen was in a folding chair, scooter parked next to her like a sidekick, and her dog wearing a vest that read emotional support assistant in Comic Sans. I doubt the guy asked anything real. He just nodded, looked serious, and flew his drone around her half-working garage and bright pink cord. She pointed toward my house a bunch, and while she never said my name, she called me the aggressor, the energy tyrant, and at one point, the porch-dwelling hacker. I could have ignored it, let her spiral on her own. But I was exhausted. Exhausted from the lies, the drama, the endless entitlement. So I clapped back. Not with a video, just a screenshot. My utility bill, before and after she hijacked my outlet. Captioned simply, she says she couldn't afford her power. She took mine. Every single day. Here's the proof. It got semi-viral. Not massive, not in the millions, but just enough. Enough that people began leaving questions in her comments. Enough that the original poster decided to quietly remove the story. Enough that the drone YouTuber had to add a pinned update. It's come to my attention there are conflicting details. I encourage everyone to do their own research. Which basically means, I messed up and now I'm slowly backing out. That should have ended it. But Karen had one last move. She filed an actual complaint with the city. Said I had installed illegal electric traps meant to knock out power and target elderly residents. That kicked off a formal inspection. A city code guy showed up with a clipboard, asking to see my setup. I walked him through it, explained the work, showed him the permits, showed receipts, had everything in order. Even got him to write a statement saying it was all up to code and totally legal. To be fair, he looked annoyed that he was even sent out. She said you wired it to explode, he muttered, scanning his checklist. If I had, wouldn't her house be gone? I replied. He laughed. Check the last box. You're good. Consider this done. And that, finally, was the actual end. Because Karen didn't just lose the block. She wore out the city's patience. After that bogus report, she got a warning, Real City paperwork, for making a baseless complaint. One more, they said, and she'd get fined. The HOA followed up too, laying down a new rule. She couldn't contact outside agencies about neighbors unless she first provided proof to the board, which, in HOA terms, meant keep your drama within the gates. Karen tried to act like the victim a few more times, but no one cared. Her spotlight had faded, and the internet had moved on to something flashier, probably involving Kat. The TikTok got taken down quietly. Her YouTube martyr video peaked at 700 views and a wave of dislikes. She started walking her dog after dark instead of in daylight. And that scooter? Gone, like it never existed. I'd love to say I came out of all this wiser, more compassionate, more aware of human imperfection. But honestly, I didn't. What I did learn is that some people will take whatever space you give and then claim you owe them more. That sometimes, to keep peace in the burbs, you've got to stir things up a bit first. That cameras, paper trails, and a smart plug can accomplish way more than shouting ever could. But more than anything, I learned that standing firm doesn't always mean a showdown. Sometimes it just means flipping the right switch at the perfect time and letting the wires and the fallout speak for themselves. A couple weeks after things cooled off, I hosted a cookout. Nothing fancy. Burgers, some music, and a few folks I barely knew before. Funny how nothing brings neighbors together like surviving a Karen situation. People showed up, swapped stories about the outlet drama, and shared their own Karen run-ins. One guy said she claimed his Christmas lights gave her migraines. Another said she reported his bird feeder for being too active. We laughed, we grilled, and as the sun dipped low, I glanced across the street. Karen's house was dark. Not spooky, just calm. The way I like it. No extension cords crossing the yard. No scooter buzzing near my driveway. Just the steady glow of my own porch light. Peaceful and undisturbed. Which is exactly why I always keep my outlet locked. And the receipt, too.